The Orthodox Conundrum podcast is made possible by listeners and supporters who believe that these conversations matter. If your business is interested in advertising to our engaged Orthodox audience, or if you'd like to sponsor an episode in honor of a loved one or simcha, please reach out to Aliza at jewishcoffeehouse.com. That's ALIZA at jewishcoffeehouse.com. Your partnership helps us continue bringing meaningful Jewish conversations to thousands of listeners every week.
We just need to come with empathy and to understand it doesn't come because they are bad people or just because they don't like Israel. It's just a story, and a story is always very, very, very tough. You cannot change a story in one night. So just to understand, this is the beginning of our conversation, because I really believe that we have to come with love, empathy, understanding, but the problem is the collective. The collective, the circumstances, and the outcomes of these behaviors, this is what damaging Israel. And if you're so focusing about yourself, you have no attention what's going on outside.
I'm Scott Kahn, and this is the Orthodox Conundrum. This is the Orthodox Conundrum on jewishcoffeehouse.com. I'm Scott Kahn. Rabbi Dov Landau, who, along with Rabbi Moshe Hillel Hirsch, is considered one of the two main rabbinic voices that guide the Degel HaTorah political party, was seen on a video about a week ago saying the following, quote, "There are wicked people, including those who wear knitted kippot. I am talking about those with knitted kippot who force people to go to the army. I would ask them, according to their position, though they have no position, rather according to their foolishness, if the state sends people, soldiers, for the sake of the country's honor, and they kill people, is that also permissible? That is literal murder. Therefore, they are inciting murder. That is what they're doing. They're making wars not for the sake of saving people, just for the honor of the state." End quote. His remarks were so incendiary that even Prime Minister Netanyahu condemned these words, and immediately, Degel HaTorah released a statement defending the words of the rabbi. As quoted by the Jerusalem Post, the party said, "The words of the great Torah scholars are the holy of holies of the people of Israel, and we live by them. Those who do not live the world of the Torah and do not understand the depth of their words, it is better not to rush to interpret them, and certainly not to attack them. Beware of their burning embers." For people outside of the Chareidi world, and certainly for some within it as well, episodes like this, offensive and hurtful statements that are also false, followed by a requisite political demand that the words of certain leading rabbis not be questioned, are reasons that some have given up on the possibility of real change coming from within the Chareidi world. Whether it's regarding army service or integration into the workplace, many people are despairing. Rabbi Menachem is different. He grew up in the Hasidic community of Mea Shearim and still identifies with that community, even as he's working from the inside to effect real change in the Chareidi world. In our conversation, Rabbi Bombach explains why meaningful change within the Chareidi world must begin with empathy rather than condemnation, even as he insists that the current trajectory is unsustainable for both Israeli society and the Chareidi community itself. We discuss the challenge of changing deeply ingrained narratives, the responsibility of rabbinic and political leadership, the opportunities and obstacles facing Chareidim who seek greater integration into Israeli society, and why he believes education is the key to preserving the best of the Chareidi world while preparing future generations to contribute more fully to the state of Israel. We also consider what those of us outside the Chareidi community can do to encourage change without deepening the divisions that already exist. We'll get to that conversation in just a moment. First, read my articles by subscribing to Orthodox Conundrum Commentary on Substack. It's free to join, and you can cancel at any time. If you'd like even more, you can become a member and receive exclusive bonus content with every episode. This week, Rabbi Bombach explains why he has chosen to remain within the Chareidi community, despite his many criticisms, rather than join a different Orthodox stream, such as, for example, religious Zionism. He also addresses a difficult and emotional question. If the Chareidi world truly values the soldiers defending Israel as they say they do, why do so many Israelis perceive that appreciation as little more than lip service? and why are Chareidim often seen attending the funerals of fallen soldiers in disappointing numbers. To hear that exclusive discussion and support the podcast, become a member of Orthodox Conundrum Commentary on Substack. The link is in the description of this podcast. Remember to subscribe to the Orthodox Conundrum podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Please rate it and write a review. Continue the conversation on Facebook by joining the Orthodox Conundrum discussion group. Finally, the best way to promote your organization, your business, or yourself is to create a high-quality podcast, and JCH Podcast Productions can help you make that happen. Whether you want to learn how to start your own podcast or want to improve the podcast you already produce, we will make it happen. Write to us at aliza@jewishcoffeehouse.com. That's ALIZA @jewishcoffeehouse.com, and let's get started with your high-quality, memorable, and effective podcast. Rabbi Menachem is a community leader, an educational entrepreneur, and founder and director of the Netzach Educational Network. As a Vishnitzer Chassid, he attended the Avat Yisrael Yeshiva and the Mir Yeshiva in Jerusalem, and then completed a bachelor's degree in education at the Moreshet Yaakov Institute and a master's degree in public policy from Hebrew University. In 2013, he founded the preparatory program for Chareidi students at the Hebrew University and the Midrasha Hasidit Torah Academy in Beitar for boys from Hasidic backgrounds. Since then, under his leadership, the Netzach Educational Network has expanded to include 12 elementary and high schools, recognized by Israel's Ministry of Education, and a successful pre-university online learning program. In April 2021, Rabbi Bombach was appointed a member of the National Committee for Research and Development in the field of promoting science and technology education. A senior project manager at the Mandel Leadership Institute, he engages regularly with different sectors of Israeli society and explains how to understand and engage with Chareidi society to groups including the Israeli police and the IDF. He is regularly invited to participate in conversations in the Israeli and overseas media about the Chareidi community in Israel, and his blog, For the Times of Israel, was voted as one of the most significant blogs of the year in both 2020 and 2021. Rabbi Menachem Bombach, thank you very much for joining me today on the Orthodox Conundrum podcast.
Shalom. Great to see you, Scott.
I'd like to begin, Rabbi Bombach, by acknowledging my perspective. I am not part of the Chareidi community, and like many people who align themselves with the religious Zionist community, I find myself very frustrated and upset by where things stand today in terms of the Chareidi attitude. I don't mean everyone, but largely the leadership, it seems, towards the army, towards integration into the larger community, its attitude towards the religious Zionist community. And obviously there are problems in the religious Zionist community as well. I'm not pretending that's not true. At the same time, I don't think it would be proper in any way for us to abandon hope in the Chareidi community or to continue on the current path. They're both not really tenable. So if I can ask you, Rav Bombach, how would you suggest that someone like me understand what's happening inside the Chareidi world today? In other words, what do you think I'm missing looking at it largely from the outside?
First, I believe you would have the answer. I think everyone would be much more happy. But absolutely, it's very tough time in Israel now. And the fact that the Chareidim, I can say the majority of the Chareidi community is also confused, because I really believe that the Chareidi community feels bad with himself about what's going on in Israel and about the unmoral issues. You know, the frustration what's going on in Israel about the army and about those edges who are stopping routes in the routes, and they don't understand the price that Israel the Israeli citizens are paying. And everyone, I meet so many people in Israeli society, and I feel how much hate and frustration they have. And I want to say, from one end, we can never blame the individuals, because the individuals, it's a story, it's a narrative. And we know that since ever that the Charedim, when they came to Israel after the Holocaust, they understood the only way to survive and to revive the Olam HaYeshivot, it's just to make it again, and to start yeshivot, and to strengthen the identity of scholars. And I think in some ways that, everyone wants to belong to the elites, to the best guys, and everyone wants to satisfy the community. Everyone wants to satisfy their parents. And really, that's why everyone feels that if someone will happen, so they can lose something. So I'm always saying, we just need to come with empathy. and to understand it doesn't come because they are bad people or just because they don't like Israel. It's just a story. And a story is always very, very, very tough. You cannot change a story in one night. So just to understand, this is the beginning of our conversation, because I really believe that we have to come with love, empathy, understanding, but the problem is the collective. The collective, the circumstances, and the outcomes of these behaviors, this is what damaging Israel. And if you're so focusing about yourself, you have no attention what's going on outside. I think this is about the frustration that we start asking for.
Then let me ask about that collective, because I agree fully, and I say very, very often that we cannot talk about individuals because every individual has his or her own story. When I speak about any criticism, I'm speaking about, as you say, the collective, but I'm going to change that. I say really the leadership, because narratives come from somewhere, and even if the narrative originally had a place, there's a certain point when someone has to change the narrative, or at least adjust it for changed circumstances. We are no longer 2 or 3 years after the Shoah. We're now 80 years later, and things have changed drastically, and rebuilding Olam HaYeshivot has happened and more. So I look at the leadership, and I'm referring both to religious and political leadership, and I say, if anyone's going to change the narrative, it has to come from, people will say it starts on the bottom, fine, but on top it also has to come. If one of the leaders of the Chareidi world in the yeshivot or on the political level would get up and say things have to change in an open way, rather than what seems to be happening, which to me sounds like the opposite, digging in their heels and saying no one will go to the army, worse and worse things about the rest of Israel. So I don't blame individuals, but I blame more than the collective. I actually blame the leadership, and I don't know how that can be fixed.
Yeah, this is absolutely very sad. I know that leadership means to take a community from point A and to move them to point B. And I think our leadership is mainly focusing about how to stagnate, how to leave them in A. And it's, I can tell you honestly, I spoke with one of the rabbis for some years ago, and I shared with them my thoughts, and also about my worries, how Israel, how our community by itself is going to pay high prices. And he said, you know what you're doing is amazing. And I think you're doing very, very great job. And I think you should continue to do what you do, but I'm not going to support you. And I asked him why. So he said something very honest. I said, to take a conservative community and to move them in order and to change them, it could generate chaos, and I can take care about those kinds of things. But this is one voice. I have to say, since the Rav Shach 40 years ago, no one can point of no one of our rabbis, and that this is a leader. I mean, leadership means to understand the problem and to analyze the problem, and to understand that if we are not going to interfere with the problem and to bring new solutions, things will going in a very bad place. So if you're asking about leadership, in my eyes, this is not a kind of leadership we know. Maybe they're speaking about another kind of leadership. But I think that I like in some ways that some rabbis and the head of the rabbis are very tough with the messages and very radical with the messages. And there's even more fundamentalism voices. And I like it. You know why? Because I feel when those kinds of words and messages comes out from rabbis, a lot of people in the moderate places, they will need to think by themselves, I belong to those kinds of messages. This is what defined me. This is what I would like to have for my kids, for the next generation. And then once you will provide them a alternative path, they will like it. They will say, oh, I belong to something different. So we're not going to change the 50%, but we're absolutely, I have to tell you something. People ask me, for how many, you have schools, you start something new in the Israeli society, but the numbers is not so high. And I will always mention one fact. When Israel was established 80 years ago, it was only 40,000 individuals in Israeli and as Chareidi. They see themselves as Chareidi. It was, by the way, a different Chareidi. And now we are...
And only about 1% of that, I believe, were in yeshivot.
Yeah, absolutely. But now there are 1,400,000 people. And now, in Israel, 2026, we are influenced more than 150,000 individuals in many circles. Imagine if our efforts is going to continue in the next coming years. Imagine Israel in the next 10 years. It's going to be a huge change. We see now things is what's going on with the army. It's much better than ever. We see in the workforce, it's much better than ever. We see more integration. We see people are, something very interesting happened since October 7, because we always mentioned about the 10% are modern and the conservative Chareidi, but with the modern touch. And we didn't realize, even in the 50%, the Messianic of majority, they care. But since October 7, everybody was revealed that even from those 50%, so many of them care. It was the first time in their life they start asking questions about the future of Israel and about the prices Israel asks. And I met people from the mainstream. And I was shocked about, it's a culture, and usually people go back to the old customs and routines. But that's the problem of a culture, in a monolithic culture. But at the same time, I have to say that things happens, and we need not just to focus about the ultra orthodox and the conservative people. We need to hold it more with the moderate people, the open-minded people.
Okay, but let's be upfront about this. At least in voting patterns, it seems that 50%, which we'll call moderate Charedim, are still by and large voting for Chareidi parties. And the Chareidi parties are dominated in terms of their religious voices and political voices by the extreme voices. I don't mean those are the only voices, but they're dominated. In other words, if you look at the people who are called the heads of the Degel HaTorah, the things that they say are not at all representative of a moderate Chareidi position. If anything, they're getting more and more extreme. So the problem is this, that yes, let's assume that that's true, that there are more and more Charedim who are moderate, but their voices in practice are simply not being heard. They have no representation, and they're still voting for the people who ostensibly don't represent them.
Yeah, one of the greatest characteristics in the Chareidi community is the obedience to rabbis. And people, even in the open-minded places, you can find people you will never expect that still are they have fear from not listening. Or when I'm saying there's another rabbi who thinks different, he will say, no, we're looking for das Torah. But there's another das Torah, and everybody needs to choose is das Torah, and everybody decide who is das Torah. But yes, absolutely, it's an issue. But I have great news for you. Maybe it's the first time since the state was established that it's going to happen. It's going to be a new Chareidi political party in the Knesset. There are great talks about, and I know personally the effort to make it happen, and there's a huge potential. And yes, you can never ever, tell you something. And Putin, right, the president of Russian, 95% is elected Putin.
Right. It's very popular.
Yeah, it's very popular. And do you understand one thing? That the majority has no choice. There is not impossible that the 95% are voting for someone. So I want to say also in the Chareidi community, we have to understand that if there's a lot of percentage who are voting for the Chareidi parties, that means the majority has no choice. And they have no choice to elect something ever. But now I think it's going to be the first time that they're going to have a alternative way to vote. By the way, the last election, they said over 70,000 individuals vote for different other political parties. And I think we can look at it and see that it's happening, maybe not in the largest numbers, but we need to strengthen those movements. And I was saying, this is not to destroy the Chareidi community. It's to rebuild, to go back to the old Chareidi normal customs and norms and morals. I see people, families. I met people and families who lost their child now since October 7. So many tragedies, what's happening in Israel, and so many pain. And I have to tell you, so many people I know in my community, they don't know what's going outside. If I would bring the pain that I was revealed since October 7, I was shocked. They don't know. And yeah, we have to do more to bring it to their tables.
Okay, Rabbi
And
Bombach, you say we. So let me ask you about your own story, because you identify as Chareidi, I believe. You've devoted your life trying to change the Chareidi society from within. So given your own background, if you grew up in a Chareidi world, I'd like to first know, how did you first realize there was a problem? And how did you decide that you would be the person who would try to change things?
I have to say that I'm not the only one. It's an ecosystem. There is a lot of people who are very active in this field. I'm blessed to interfere the education system, because I figure out since when I start my first job as a counselor for Russian immigrants that I don't know nothing. If someone wants to know what's the feeling of a person who felt in one stage in his life what does it mean to be ignorant, and it's very, very tough point, and that's what I felt, because I didn't know so many things. I just share with someone one of my stories. I interviewed. It's not just about secular studies; it's also about the religious studies. If you know, the Chareidi community control you. They make sure that you don't have access to all kinds, even of religious books. Even Nach, Nevi'im Ktuvim. It's not something that it's popular in the Chareidi community, but I shared one.
Nach is a Zionist plot, I think.
Yeah. So I interviewed one of my students before he came to my school, and I asked him if he have ever learned Nach. So he said, yes, sure, Yoshua. So I asked him, what's about Michai Nachum? So he asked me, why you changed our discussion? He didn't know that it's a part of the Nach. He said, why you change the subject? And by the way, by then he become and the Chidon HaTanach Olami as the vice Chatan, Sgan Chatan.
Number 2, right?
Yeah. So
he came in second place.
Yeah. And that's very sad. So when you feel those feelings that you have no access to the world and you cannot communicate and you don't have a language. I didn't speak Hebrew. Imagine it. And for sure, I didn't know ABC.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Mea Shearim. Yeah, so that's why I grew up in very radical community and very isolated community and anti-Zionist community. So that is the narrative where I grew up. So once I realized that I have no access, I try to do the best to close those gaps and to fulfill those gaps, and still I'm in the middle of the job, and I will never, I think, fulfill, because in those ages it's crucial to have access to those basic studies, and then when I start and I get revealed to the Israeli society, I find so many people. And I said to myself, it's not fair. It's not fair. I was very impressed from the national Zionist community. They find out how to combine between Torah and Derech Eretz, how to be a normal Jew, how to be a normal civic a person in a state. So since then, for many years, I start for many years in many projects, but in the education system, I'm so excited, because when I see my graduates, I see the people who get revealed to math, English, history, and civics, and and computers and science. You feel you build a different generation, and to hold your identity, to love your community, to find what is good in the community, and the same way to be an active, normal person. And there's no contradiction between them. It's not a contradiction. It just comes together. I want to share with you one thing. I met a few great Roshei Yeshivot from the National Zionist community for 2 days ago. It was a discussion. And they share with me openly about the worry that they have of the young generation. Some of them, as a percentage of young that taking away the kippah of the derech, and challenges about religions and all those kinds of things. And they said in some ways they're jealous about the Chareidi community, because in the Chareidi community, 90% stays in the community, and the National Science community, it's about 75%. And you know what I told them? I told them what I started just before, when I just talked. I said, it's a place let for young people to choose. And imagine that 75%, they have a choice to move to a different sector, to leave their spirituality, and 75% choose to stay inside. It's much more than the Chareidi community, because the Chareidi community, they're just there because they grew up there, and the majority never ask themselves who I am and what is meant to be, to choose, and why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's just a lot of practice and very less about knowledge. And that's what I'm saying. They was they like it very much. I felt I give them something. But I really believe there is some great things inside the community. I feel there's great values. I don't want to lose it, but it's going to be terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible.
Okay, I want to ask why it will be terrible in a moment, but first I want to ask about what you mean by the Chareidi community, and I'll explain what I mean, because it seems that very often the definition of Chareidi has become certain things, namely, we're not part of the larger community, we don't serve in the army, we don't do secular studies. And if someone were to be a Chareidi, but at the same time go to the army, learn secular studies, be integrated into society to whatever degree, then you can say you're a Chareidi, but Lamaisa, you're not Chareidi anymore. You're just, reminds me a little bit of Rabbi Nachman's Turkey Prince, that he can say he's a Turkey, but he's not a Turkey. And in the same way, my question really is, at what point are you just saying we're Charedim, but we're really not? We're just religious Zionist Jews with a black kippah.
Listen, the idea of Charedim is to protect your spirituality. That's the idea of Charedim, right? I'm always saying that if 90% of your energy goes to protect your beliefs, that's mean very less energy stays to deal with the essence, with the foundations. And always I'm saying, if you are all just thinking about the walls, and one day you're going to find out there's nothing inside. So let's be honest. The idea of the Chareidi community, it was very beneficial and very, very useful in the Europe for 300 years ago, to protect yourself from the outside world. But once you come to Israel, you need to redefine what is meant to be Chareidi, to be disconnected from your brothers, to elaborate the hate, polarization. What's the issue? So absolutely, if your main value is sitting and studying Torah, so okay, that's great. I really believe in it. And who can sitting and studying Torah? Let's encourage him to doing so. But you know the truth, that you try to raise a value that the majority cannot be a part of it. And it's not fair for the majority. And that is a kind of discussion that no one has the courage to talk about. But you know what? So one of the rabbis told me that 1,000 nichnasim and just one stays.
1,000 go in and one comes out. Yes.
Yeah. So we know we're going to pay prices, but we're going to raise huge Talmidei Chachamim. But what's the price? What do you mean a Talmid Chacham if someone has no morality? If someone can stop people in the road? And what does it mean? You see people are suffering around you and you have excuses. Why not? I have a lot of criticism. Since October 7, I had before, but now it becomes a part of my pain point. How we can explain for the next generation? I'm telling you, the young generation is going to ask the parents in 10 years, I heard about the October 7, terrible things happened for Israel, terrible things since ever, and where you were in those times. Where you were, did you was involved in something? Did you take care about something? And if the parents are going to give those excuses, studying Torah, and they by themselves didn't sitting and studying Torah, the young generation is going to feel the flavor of fakeness. And I think this is what's going to damage dramatically the future of the Chareidi community. That's what I'm saying. If you want to preserve, you want to respect the community, the only way to make it happen is just to say publicly and honestly who can sit against the Torah. Let's encourage them doing so, and who's not supposed to take care what's going with us. And you know what? I feel those kind of conversation comes more and more and more. And that's why I bring with myself a lot of hope.
So what are the things that you'd like to preserve about the Chareidi community? Again, with that same question about the definition of being Chareidi, what are the elements that you think need to be preserved and spread out for that matter?
Yeah. There is a lot of things. I think, by the way, no one holds the flag of sitting in studying Torah as the priority of other values. And I like it very much. Even, the Hasidic community tries to adopt those kinds of values, not so successfully, but still it's very nice. And I also don't believe of a Jewish world without sitting and studying Torah. But again, the question is how you practice your Torah. This is a great question that is missing. The second thing I would likely to preserve in the community is no one is alone. Everyone belongs to the community. The community takes care very much about everyone. And I think it's such a beautiful thing. This is what preserves the community, gives a feeling of belonging. And that's why the Madad HaOsher, how do you say?
The happiness index.
The happiness, is very high in the Chareidi community. People also, I have to say, the average life in Bnei Brak is higher than in Tel Aviv. People, no, I think it's very nice. And also the chesed, how much generosity we have. And people get up in the morning and still, you know what is really impressing me? Still in 2026, some people choose a frugal lifestyle. They don't want beautiful cars, beautiful houses, just to sitting in very tiny, sweet home and to raise a family and to raise them for Yirat Shamayim and loving Torah and to help others and to not to speaking Lashon Hara and to speaking about Tikkun Olam and about faith. It's a beautiful conversation, and this is who we are. And that's what I would like. I have fear to lose. That's what I would like to have. But again, those great things, and we need to see how it's the implementing in the society, how in your life.
Okay, then let's go back to what you said a few minutes ago when you said that if things continue as they are now, I'll quote you, you said it will be terrible, terrible, terrible. So what are you referring to in particular, and why will it be terrible? And what I mean is, I, coming from a different perspective, say, yes, it's terrible for people not to, for example, contribute to the army. But from a Chareidi perspective, why will it be terrible?
It's terrible because it's going to be a lot of emptiness. People cannot, when you are 2%, 4%, and everybody helps everyone, it could be sustainable, but not when you are 14% of the Israeli society.
What is it? What is the thing that isn't sustainable?
It's not sustainable. You cannot finance yourself. The majority has no, I get a message for 2 days ago from a friend. He lives in Beitar Elite, and he has a agent office. And he said, great people come to me, talented people, sweet young elite, and they want a job. They want to finance themselves, and they don't know ABC. And this is a job that you have to have. And I just told them, and he asked me if I can give him some of my graduates. And he said, this is so sad. If you ask me, it's damaging the image of God. This is not fair. And people in the age of 20 has no choice. If you provide them with all kinds of knowledge, and then they can decide in the age of 20 if they're just to sit in Torah or to go to be an engineer, a lawyer, or whatever, it's okay, it's fine, it's honest. But in the 20, it's like handicap. It's people have no choice in the. It's not Jewish. It's never ever in the Jewish history. Not the Ram. I will tell you one thing, but please don't laugh because it's a very sad story. I'm laughing.
You're laughing.
I'm laughing because I was shocked. I have a graduate that is very sweet, Hasidic guy, and very conservative sweet boy, and he decided to, after my yeshiva, yes, full matriculation, 5 units in physics, 5 units in mathematics, 10 units in computer science, and 5 units in Gemara. The most beautiful child.
Let me just explain to our non-Israeli listeners that units refers to yechidot. This is when you take the bagriyot, the equivalent of college boards, essentially, and a certain amount in class, whatever it is exactly, 5 units is a full or more than full load. So even 10 units is even more than that.
But he decided after.
It's very impressive.
Yeah, he wants to continue studying in a regular yeshiva, to continue building his Chareidi Hasidic identity. And I was very, very happy for him. That's amazing. Yeah, it's okay, it's fine. So he registered for one of the yeshivot, and one of the Rosh Yeshivot called me and asked me, I see someone register in the name of a Midrasha Hasidit. That's my flagship school, where I serve as a Rosh Yeshiva. And he said, what's the Midrasha Hasidit? I said, it's a place that combines officially secular and religious. And I say, oh, how you get to my school? This is not a kind of kids I'm looking for. Please, it's a mistake. And I said, Rega, please, wait a second. Maybe you can meet him. I promise you never ever met someone like him. I promise you. No, but that's exactly Rabbeinu Shalom. You give them English and math and pa. So I asked him, please, you heard about the Rambam, Maimonides? He was a scientific person. You heard about the Ibn Ezra? You know what he answered me? You're going to be shocked. You know what he answered me? I don't know Maimonides. I don't know Ibn Ezra. It's 2026.
Wow. I promise you I wouldn't laugh.
Please. I cried. I said to Mr. Ribono Shel Olam, if you're speaking about Jewishness, about religious, nothing is interesting, just to protect your beliefs. But
Except, of course, it's so ironic because in the name of protecting the past, they're denying the past and saying all we care about is the present.
The paradox, absolutely. There was many paradox, others.
Obviously.
It's a different conversation, but you know what? He met my student, and he fell in love. He said, wow. And quietly asked one of my staff if we have more of this kid. Right?
Well, I guess that's how change is going to happen. But let me ask you now.
I heard that Rav Shach, Zichrono Levacha, he liked very much the graduates from the Yeshivot Tichoniyot. He said they are very talented and they have great skills and it's fun to study with them. That's what he said. Rabbi Ofman, I saw it's one of his assistants. He wrote as one of his books.
I already mentioned this, but I still have to say it again. And I have no intention, God forbid, of denigrating the memory of great Gedolim like Rav Shach or Rav Yashiv. That is not what I'm doing. But as a method of leadership that we see among many leaders in the Chareidi community, I simply cannot comprehend this idea of publicly saying that something belongs in cherem or is a terrible thing and the practitioners are wicked, and privately saying that this is a wonderful thing and you should continue. I can't understand how that works. The concept is a lack of leadership. It comes across, whatever their motivations, as a form of cowardice. When privately you say this is a very good thing, but publicly not only not supporting it, but actively trashing it and saying how bad it is.
Completely agree with you. It's very set point, and it's like, when people ask me, what does it mean exile?
Yeah.
Galut. This is galut. This is exactly galut. Galut is not just physical, where you live and who you are, where you live. Exile is also who you are and what's going on around you. And this is very, very sad point. I completely agree. I don't understand. I really believe they are great people, huge Talmidei Chachamim, but I don't know. I think in the time of the Chazal, of the sages, it was also Nesi'im, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. It was people are very, very involved in the life. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. It was people, rabbis, great rabbis, but they just didn't have mediators to mediate them what's going on outside. Those great Talmidei Chacham is really, really deep Talmidei Chachamim who are focusing just on learning, and some just terrible people surround them and bring them terrible ideas just to make sure that the Chareidi opinion is going to continue be dependent on them, and not and they should not have any ability to fulfill themselves and to build themselves and to be normal people. It's just very sad point in the Jewish history.
We're going a little bit off the topic, but I think it's very important. I'd like to address this again, which is that you're talking about what I believe is a quite modern phenomenon of having the Degel HaTorah surrounded by layers upon layers of people who protect them. And the reason that this is so problematic, aside from the obvious, I mean, back in the day, I grew up in Boston. Rav Soloveitchik Zatzal, it was before my time, but on Shabbos afternoon, in between Mincha Maariv, he'd sit down, everyone would come to shul and just ask him questions, and then they'd have Maariv. There was no gatekeeper. Rav Moshe Feinstein Zatzal, I heard that every week a local woman in the Lower East Side used to call him up, ask him what time candlelighting was, because he was the local rabbi. To us, that idea that someone would call, Rav Shach with that kind of question doesn't make sense to us. Or maybe not Rav Shach is a bad example. Rav Elyashiv, maybe that's when it started a little bit more. But my question is this. When you look at the situation with these people surrounding them, aside from the fact that they're insulated, it also creates the fact that they are given information by people who tell them specific, not necessarily objective information. And you'll hear, we've seen these videos of a Degel HaTorah who was told by one of his handlers, who should the people of Beit Shemesh vote for? I live in Beit Shemesh. And he'll say, well, who are the candidates? He'll say, oh, one's a Torah person and one's an anti-Torah person. So the Rev will say, obviously the Torah candidate. First of all, it wasn't true. The person they called the anti-Torah candidate may or may not be anti-Torah, but it's based on hearsay. And second of all, and this is the halachic issue, one is not allowed to judge unless you hear both sides. To go and say, oh, obviously you have to vote for A and not B, based on what someone told you B is about and B is anti-Torah, when you haven't actually seen that yourself and investigated it. I don't even understand, apart from the fact that they're insulated, I would think that a Degel HaTorah would say, I can't rule on that until I actually talk to both candidates. If you don't give me that opportunity, I won't say anything. And yet that concept that they won't say anything is laughable. Of course they're going to say something based on what they're told. And I'll add one more halachic problem, which is that the vast majority of the people who are called the Degel HaTorah are usually in their late 90s. The Rambam paskins that when a person reaches the age of Zakein Muflag, which means very old, which is generally understood as being somewhere between 70 and 90, he should no longer be on the Sanhedrin because, as the Rambam says, he loses compassion, or in modern terms, we could say idiomatically, he loses a few miles off his fastball. Whatever the reason, and admittedly, this is not the Sanhedrin, but the value of making sure that a person who's overly old, of course, to get our respect, but at a certain point to say that he is the ultimate decisor of halacha, that das Torah for Klal Yisrael, according to some people, that goes against the value that the Rambam is articulating. I don't mean to pile on, but I'm just telling you my problems looking at leadership. I grieve over this.
To strengthen your message and what you said, for 7 years ago, I tried to take over existing school, and it was a little bit a problem with some of the staff. And they came out with a letter from Rabbi Gershon Edelstein that he's against, he signed, I don't let you work with Netzach, with my organization. It's 40 steps. It was a huge event. And I shared it with his nephew, with Rabbi Gershon Edelstein nephew. And he is a courage person. He came to him and said, Uncle, is that true what I say? And he never heard about my name. He never heard about Netzach. He never signed. But he damaged in his name, they damaged the whole system. It was Baruch Hashem L'Tova. But I'm just telling you, you cannot imagine how many things comes out, but they never saw. And but also you heard what's going on the last few days. Rabbi Landau is speaking and saying it's very a set point. I never know what's going on there and how those kinds of...
I mean, Rabbi Landau, in this particular case, a day later after the uproar, he came out with a sort of explanation, except the explanation, if you were to ask me, what should someone like that say? If he did not mean it the way it was understood, and that's what he says, I would think that he should have said, I was misinterpreted. I'm sorry that my words hurt people. This is what I meant to say. What he actually said, and I'm going to quote part of it, as was proven over the past day when remarks I made in a private conversation were published, and through ignorant hatred, they approached the remarks in a distorted manner and a lack of understanding. That's not an apology. That's defensive and accusing the people who heard what he said, and I heard it too, of having ignorant hatred. Trashing people again for misinterpreting him.
Explanation was worse than the first
Exactly.
message.
The explanation said nothing except for these people should be
Yeah.
ashamed, and basically that they
By the
misinterpreted
way-
it. It was crazy.
By the way, this morning called me some mishpachot shakulot, if there can
Bereaved
help,
families.
yeah, to help them to meet his wife. I try to make it, but I will see. But mishpachot shakulot, he should meet them
Rav Landau.
and understand how what his words is generated.
Rav Tamir Granot, Shlita, has been tremendous in this area, and he's so soft-spoken. He's actually one of the Rosh Yeshiva of my son's yeshiva, or Shaul in Tel Aviv. Rav Tamir's son was killed in the early days of the war up north, and though he's very soft-spoken, he's very determined in the way that he describes the emotions that his wife felt when she heard the former chief rabbi, Rav Yitzchak Yosef, talk about the army in such terrible terms. Specifically, I believe in that case, I'm not sure, I believe it was the specific time that he said, if the army insists on drafting the Chareidim or the yeshiva students, we're going to leave the country. And Rav Tamir said he has to go to his wife and ask for an apology. This is extraordinarily sad.
You know, Rabbi Gershon Edelstein, he said for many years ago that who is going to academic system or Bamach schools, they will don't have Olam Haba. So I met we have a lot of parents in our system. So I asked one of the parents, "Are you let yourself not to have Olam Haba? You came to our school." So he said, "Because I don't have Olam Haba, I let myself do everything. I'm free now. Now I'm free. I can do. I'm Baruch Hashem free now."
Oh boy! So let's talk about some solutions. I don't mean specifically practically, but what would you like to see happen? Meaning, I'm not sure how quite to get there, but Rav Bombach, if you could become the Gadol Hador and instruct people with Das Torah, what should happen? Okay. Can you describe what the future of the Chareidi community would look like vis-a-vis secular studies in the army and the rest of integration?
I would say, first of all, to give legitimacy for young people who wants to go to the workforce. To give legitimacy people who wants to go in the protected army units. To give legitimacy to say you are part of us, even you go to those places. I would say to close all the yeshivot, and to restart the elite yeshivot, like Mir and Ponovich, the great yeshivot, where I think over 95% of people who choose to go there, they mean it seriously. I know them. I also was in Mir. I know what is meant to be in Yeshivas. Mir is really dedication for the Jewish studies. And but the majority, and then to start to give more legitimacy of combine the secular studies, Limudei Liba. I think the legitimacy, I will never say because it's more private issues, but some of a rabbi who was very against me in the beginning, he knows that two of his eniklach learns in my school. Eventually learns in my school. He was against me. And I will never say because I want to protect the secrecy. But I think once we will see more and more of those kinds of things, then people will feel it's okay. That's the new way of life, and it's the new normal. And I think it's going to bring so much joy for the Israeli society. People will feel so connected because we bring with ourselves so great things. And why the Chareidi, the Masorati, the traditional community, and the Chalonim should feel so much hate. This, everyone knows this is not what's going to bring Mashiach. This is what they're going to destroy, continue destroying Israel. So I think if this is what happen and more to start, it's not going to happen in one day. But if one rabbi and then a second rabbi, in a third rabbi, in a new city, in a different place, and to give the legitimacy for the mamach schools and more yeshivot, and you know what? I think this is the place where we are going, because I heard from so many people just recently, when some of them they met my graduates, how they're great people, and the majority are in the community, and they sitting and studying Torah, and you see them how they look how they daven, and how they, in the same time, now some of them become doctors and lawyers and engineers. I was invited to Borough Park for a special Shabbat, music Shabbat, and came after, it was after Lenin, came to me a Hasidic sweet guy, and he said, why are you doing all the crazy things in Israel? You teach those kids secular studies. You see in America, you can see in the Hasidic community, wealthy people, they have a lot of money, they never learned officially studies. So I asked him, can you tell me who is going to be your next doctor, lawyer? Who is going to design things? You need professionals. No, you don't need. You see, it happens by themselves. You don't need to interfere. So I asked him, yeah, but who is going to build the next missiles in Israel? Oh, I didn't think about it. He said, wow, you're right. Just need to open eyes and people understand the prices. Things is not, God don't want us to be animals. He wants to be mentioned, to be active people, to take care, to choose. This is about our mission.
That's very interesting. And I find your optimism and hope contagious, and it makes me very happy. Admittedly, maybe that shouldn't happen because we're 4 hours away from Tisha B'Av right now as we're recording on Wednesday. But I'm glad to hear that positive message. I've heard other people say something a little bit different. I can't promise the story is true, but I once heard, I think, if I'm getting it right, from one of Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky Zatzal's grandchildren, that Rav Yaakov at one point told his students that it's asur, or none of you should go to medical school, whatever it was. And when someone, or maybe the grandson himself, I don't know, asked Rav Yaakov where we can have doctors, he goes, because Baruch Hashem, not all of them are going to listen to me. Meaning there still is a place, I suppose, within that way of thinking. You say, how will they build the next missiles? Because not everybody's going to listen to this guy.
Great. I like the story. Thank you for sharing.
Okay.
It's really inspiring.
Let me ask you from a different perspective now. Again, speaking as somebody who's not a card-carrying member of the Chareidi community, for someone like you, what would you want someone like me, who is broadly aligned with the Dati Leumi community, even though, let me say, I have lots of criticisms of the religious Zionist world. I am very upset with the religious Zionist world right now, and I could criticize it just as much as I can criticize the Chareidi world. So nevertheless, I'm still more naturally attuned to that community. Looking at it from my perspective and looking at me, what would you want people like me outside the Chareidi community to do? What's the way to support people like you, to support a Chareidi change in such a way that it will cause Chareidim to agree, as opposed to the backlash, that digging in their heels and saying, no, we're not going to change anything? Because it's definitely true that the more that people are allowed outside, the more the louder voices on the inside gain prominence.
Wow, this is such a tough question. First of all, just to realize the differentiation between the many parts in the community. If people like us want to be a part of Israel, and so it's a question what we can do together, how we can communicate together, to partnership together, find common issues, common interests, and there's a lot to do together, and hopefully I think we have. And about the community, I have to say, I'm going to say something very not practical, but I wish it should happen. It should be. And I would say that we need to start speaking with the Chareidim, not on the Chareidim.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
I mean, the best way to destroy the dialogue is to define for another person who is he and what is his identity, right? And I think change starts when people start feeling that you respect them, and when they and also when it's okay to say we have questions more than answers, and we know that we don't understand everything until the end. So those kinds, and once we come respect, maybe it could help more people not to protect themselves, to be in mignanot. Just as you say, okay, I feel he has real curiosity. He has honest curiosity, because I think with hate, nothing we can do with. It's not influencing, it's not convincing, and people try to put themselves more mask on their faces just to protect themselves. But it's very hard, because sometimes those kinds of actions bring people in very, very edges and terrible places. But I wish, it's very hard to say. But
I
this is what
understand. I'll say myself, the reason that what you say makes a lot of sense, but is very difficult nevertheless, is that before October 7th, perhaps it was a lot easier. But now, I've probably mentioned this in every one of my past episodes over the past few weeks. I had a grandson exactly a year ago. And in that time, his father has been in Miluim 3 different times. Just now he was in Lebanon in Miluim for 10 weeks on and off. And that's the 3rd time since his son was born. A 1-year-old has a father who's away 3 different times, including 10 weeks the last time, back and forth. And it's very hard to say, I'm really curious, open-minded about why none of you will serve. Like, what's the reason that you won't go and you think that your learning is protecting it, even though I know the sources as well and they don't say that? Yeah. So, meaning in a direct way. So it's very hard to say I'm genuinely curious without actually having some secret resentment.
I know. I'm more for it. You know, I'm always saying that I have a privilege to criticize my community because I'm a part of it. Who put me to criticize other communities? There's in other communities, people who grew up there and they have a legitimacy to criticize. I really believe that it needs to come with love. And even I never ever feel hate. I feel frustration, anger, and yeah, it's terrible. It's mamash, it's one of the darkest moments in the Jewish history.
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
People are ignoring what's going outside. They're not taking part and just finding excuses. And it's the political members of Knesset as a huge part in this place. And it's so sad. I have to say it. That's why I'm saying, I tell you, when there's an unwilling situation, there's 2 ways out to react: doing nothing or complaining, or try to change in your territory. And this is exactly what I'm not Mashiach. I'm not gonna save Israel. I'm not gonna bring the redemption. But I do things, people like me, that really nail down the problem, really bring a lot of joy and hope. One of my favorite stories is that, and I share it many times because I feel great words and great moments brings more of this. For some years ago, just when I started my mission, it was a professor in Hebrew University, Amiram Gonen, and it was not religious, but he was with a lot of respect to the religious community, and it was very, very for the future of Israeli society. And then he came to me and said, I'm 80 years old, I'm close to die, and I would like to ask you a favor. I don't want to die just with frustration. I want to die with hope. I'm 80 years here in Israel, and let me come to your school and speak to your students, because once I will come, I will feel the what you're going to bring for the future of Israel. He came 5 times, and he spent 5 hours, and he passed away after 1 year, and I shared by his funeral, and he said, "Listen, what you're doing is something that's going to bring so much hope for the future of Israel." And I have to tell you, I'm embracing his words and his hope, and it becomes a part of my energy. So it's a proof that great words is building a reality. It's building the reality.
Thank you for sharing that story. That's beautiful and very hopeful. Now here's a bonus question for members of Orthodox Conundrum Commentary. Rabbi Baumbach, you have deliberately chosen to remain within the Hasidic and Chareidi community. And even though you're challenging many of its assumptions, you're also remaining part of it. I'd like to ask why you chose to stay inside rather than do what seems maybe more obvious and join the religious community that's not Chareidi or Hasidic. To hear the rest of Rabbi Baumbach's answer, along with our discussion about why many Israelis perceive the Chareidi community's appreciation for Israeli soldiers as little more than lip service, and why Chareidim are often seen attending the funerals of fallen soldiers in disappointing numbers, become a member of Orthodox Conundrum Commentary. You'll get access to this bonus conversation, along with exclusive members-only content from almost every episode. The link is in the description of this podcast. Let me ask about a specific fear that I often hear, that Chareidi parents are afraid, as religious Zionist parents are afraid as well, of their kids becoming not religious. And you cited statistics before, which I hadn't heard, but you said that 90% of Chareidi kids remain religious or remain Chareidi, whereas 75% of kids in the religious Zionist world remain in that world. Regardless, the Chareidi community often says they're afraid of assimilation. They're afraid if they follow the path that you're suggesting with more secular studies, army service, integration into the workforce, they will no longer be religious. How would you answer that problem? And I'll give you my own answer. That's a real fear. That's a problem in education. Just to use an example that came up last week, my son Yaakov is in the army. He's right now somewhere up north. Last week he came home for Shabbat, and I asked him, Rosh Chodesh was last Wednesday. I said, so for Wednesday and Thursday before you came home, did they have only parv in the army or did they have fleishiks? Because it was the 9 days. And he said, no, they had fleishiks. So I said, what do you do? He goes, I didn't need the fleishiks. Okay, I didn't need the fleishiks. And I said, this week, though, is it going to be all parv because now it's Shavuot Shechalbo and the Sephardim? And he didn't know. He goes, whatever. If he has to eat parv, he'll eat parv all week. Now, I'm like, I don't understand why that's such a difficult thing for someone in the Chareidi world to say also, fine, if it's not perfect, if you have to eat parv, you'll eat parv. So why this overwhelming fear of assimilating into Israeli society when hopefully education should keep them religious regardless? Or to put it less charitably, why this demand for perfection that seems to be there, that if things aren't perfect in the army, then we can't go? I don't understand. That's part one. Part two is, given that that's the fear that is there, how do they overcome that fear? How do we overcome those reservations?
So, but isolation can also lead to collapse. You can lose your children outside the walls, and you can lose them inside the walls as well. And the real question is not how, I would say, how to hide the walls. The real question is how we can deep their identity in a strong issue, to build a strong identity and not to have to fear from all the engagements. I mean, to transform the engagement into opportunity. And it's a different kind of conversation. I would say that I told you before also, I so many people in my community, the emptiness and the frustration and they're not satisfied with themselves, and they feel so bad with themselves, and they're so worried about the future. And I have to tell you, so many of them are not focusing about religious issue at all. And that's what I'm saying. If one day you find out you're just about protecting, you lose inside a lot of energy. And it's a different generation. Imagine if Am Yisrael would never change. We would stay in the Egypt. But we change, and because we change, we came back to Israel and we rebuilt Israel, and we are one of the successful periods in the Jewish history in terms of reviving the Israeli nation. So I'm saying, if your mission is just to protect the practice, the shtreimel, and the bekeche, you're right. Absolutely right. That's the best way to make it happen. But if you tend to raise a generation of God-fearing Jews, loving Torah, and be involved in life, and to be an active person, to be like all of our sages, it's completely, we need to restart thinking about the Chareidi, the meaningful, the structure of the Chareidi community, about the outcomes of the Chareidi community, and to be honest, I told you once that it was for 8 years ago, a huge event against technology in America. 60,000 people attend the event. And how we know about? Because over 60% they recorded the event with the iPhone. So you lose your battle and you continue speaking against technology. You know, I decide an online school, Eshkolot. We have over 60,000 registers. They have access to English, math, and science. It's the largest Chareidi school ever. Okay? And I have to tell you, you cannot imagine how many people have access from all over Israel, from Mea Shearim and from outside Mea Shearim. People feel it's a different world. And just to say no doesn't help. Who wants to go to the neighbors to see the kids? for 2 days ago I will find it out. I will send it to you. There's a very popular blog guy in the Chareidi community. He's a Yerushalmi guy, very sweet guy. And he said that he just passed over next to a elementary school and they throw him stones. And he said, never, ever I could imagine. They're not against me. What they do me, they do for others. Just which kind of education we bring for our new generation? What's happening in our community? He's screaming. And this is a result of just focusing what not and not what yes. So absolutely, it's a great challenge. I'm very, very glad and very blessed that I'm not the God Lado, because I really don't know what's the exact formula to make it happen. But I do know that to start more and more education, great schools that really educate, provide the best skills, life skills, soft skills, Menschlichkeit, and to love each other, and to raise for arvut adadit, and for understanding that different kinds of people and different circumstances, and to enlarge the tolerance in the Chareidi community. I think this is what could bring a lot of joy and a better future for the Jewish people.
Okay, Rabbi Baumbach, that's a very, very beautiful message. So let me conclude by asking you, on a hopeful note, if you were to look back at this moment now, 20 years from now, and you could talk about what has been achieved, what would be your vision for the Chareidi community in Israel when Israel reaches 100 years old in about 20 years from now?
Wow. I wish not to speak anymore in 20 years about integration anymore. It's not going to become an issue. I think we're going to see thousands, 10 over 100,000 people who are in natural way, doctors, lawyers, engineers, initiators, commanders, and people who are working in all over Israel, are part of the government. And we will see they can stay very authentic and with fulfillment life and very religious. I think that's the measurement about religious. And now it's very rare to find a Chareidi doctor, but it's going to come a day that no one is going to ask if Chareidi could be a partner in the Jewish state. Everybody is going to see it's going to be a natural reality. And I think we are in the best way. You should know we have a very nice project with the joint that we bring people who have already a first degree, and then we provide them a pre-academic program to become physicians. I mean, they get accepted to the medical schools. And the last few months, we helped for more than 25 people, Chareidi people who get accepted to the medical schools. This is a miracle. You would never imagine it. And it happens and I'm very excited about it.
Okay, well, God willing, it will continue to happen. And with your help, I believe that it will. Rabbi Menachem Baumbach, I appreciate it. Thank you. I'd like to offer a word of thanks to our Patreon supporters. Patreon functions as a voluntary tip jar for Jewish Coffee House and our family of podcasts. Patreon supporters at all levels, as well as paid subscribers to Orthodox Conundrum Commentary, will have access to our upcoming private Q&A sessions. Your support in either place helps sustain thoughtful Jewish conversation. Additional bonus material, including the longer episodes with bonus questions, is available to paid subscribers of Orthodox Conundrum Commentary on Substack. No matter how you choose to support this work, we are deeply grateful. Subscribe to the Orthodox Conundrum podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and please rate it and write a review. I'd appreciate it if you go to Apple Podcasts and rate and review the Orthodox Conundrum. It takes literally 2 minutes. It's just giving a certain number of stars and writing 1 or 2 sentences. Please like the Orthodox Conundrum podcast on Facebook and join our growing Facebook group, the Orthodox Conundrum Discussion Group, where you can feel free to discuss issues in Orthodoxy in an honest and friendly environment. Subscribe to my Substack, Orthodox Conundrum Commentary. Check out the link in the description of this podcast to get your free subscription today. Finally, do you have a message that needs to get out? Do you want to promote your business, your organization, or your cause? The best way is by producing a podcast, and Jewish Coffee House can make it happen. I have experience producing hundreds of podcasts, both for myself and for satisfied clients. Whether you want to learn everything you need in one day, or relax and record and let me do the heavy lifting, Jewish Coffee House Productions will work with you to make it happen and make it even better than you imagined. Let me help you today. Write to us at aliza@jewishcoffeehouse.com. That's ALIZA @jewishcoffeehouse.com. And let's get started with your high-quality, memorable, and effective podcast. I'm Scott Kahn. This has been The Orthodox Conundrum on jewishcoffeehouse.com.